Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books, and I've been covering Disney very closely these past couple of months. Bob Iger is in a crisis at Disney. He's about to announce the latest quarterly results for Disney tomorrow, February 8th. In the meantime, while that is considered to be an incredibly crucial time because it is the first quarterly report since the disastrous quarterly report from Bob Chapek, when it was absolutely necessary, apparently, for Bob Iger to come back out of retirement and take over the company, supposedly. Now he's got to explain what's been going on in the meantime since he's been in control. It's only been a couple of months. However, it is expected he's going to have to announce some major strategic initiatives to talk about fixing the company. How are you going to fix this company? We know that he has a very deep passion for inclusion at Disney. He added it to one of Disney's key values in 2020. So now that we have that, and yes, Bob Chapek was CEO at the time, but we all know that this all started under Bob Iger. But now that Bob Iger is in control of the company, he's going to have to explain to Wall Street how he's going to fix the company. In the meantime, in addition to having to explain how he's going to fix the company, he's also got to deal with this problem, which is Disney World workers rejecting the contract offer that Disney made to them. And unions that represent 32,000 full-time workers said the vote was overwhelmingly against the proposal, which would have raised pay by around $1 per hour. In addition to that, Governor DeSantis this week is going to, through their special session, which is basically just getting their state legislature together, making the final decision and announcement on how they're going to handle working with Disney in the future for Disney World, because they've lost the Reedy Creek District because of their pursuit of attacking the state over the Don't Say Gay bill, as they call it. That's not working out so well. In addition, just coming out now, Universal again is crushing Disney at the animated box office, which is kind of ridiculous because why should Universal be making more successful animated movies than Disney? Of course they should. Disney is known for animation. Disney rejuvenated animation in the 1990s. People thought it wasn't really going to be credible to be able to make animated films anymore, but between Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, they were able to resuscitate the animation division with the help of Roy Disney, and it became a major hit again. However, it's not for Disney. So let's get into this first article. Disney CEO Bob Iger has very little room for maneuver as he tackles layoffs, budget cuts, and a company reorganization, and questions over the future of Hulu and ESPN. Before we get into the details, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications and give me a thumbs up. Aside from a quick visit to Disney World in January, Bob Iger has been lying very low. Friends who've been accustomed to seeing the Disney CEO on the LA lunch circuit said he's been largely absent from the scene since returning to Burbank headquarters on November 21st. And industry executives and investors who are used to check-ins from Big Bob say he's been mute. Similarly, top Disney executives have been telling associates they're not sure what the 71-year-old chief has in store for them. We should also note that Bob Chapek was selected as his successor by Bob Iger and approved by the board. The board makes the final decision, board of directors of Disney, but Chapek was his hand-picked successor that the board said, sure, we'll take Bob Chapek. Didn't work out so well. Much will become clear on Wednesday, February 8th, when Iger lays out what's next, along with earnings reflecting the final months of 2022, Disney's 2023 fiscal first quarter. Lots has happened since the company's last earnings call, when Chapek hit investors with news that its streaming division had racked up $1.5 billion in losses for the quarter. In total, Disney has lost more than $11 billion operating Disney Plus so far. That's a lot of money, actually. One factor that led to his abrupt departure. Disney Plus subscriber rolls also jumped by 12 million for a total of 235 million subscribers to the company's three services, which also include Hulu and ESPN Plus. Wall Street appears to be expecting some fireworks on Wednesday. Even though it's been quiet, Iger is very decisive, said Bank of America Securities veteran media analyst Jessica Reif-Elric, who noted that Iger launched a flurry of new initiatives when he first became CEO in 2005. After taking over from Michael Eisner, he made peace with Steve Jobs, bought Pixar, and moved Monday Night Football to ESPN, Reif told Insider. Now, she added, the first order of business is internal, and then cut costs. In a letter to shareholders on Thursday, February 2nd, the Disney board wrote that it's overseeing important strategic changes that our CEO Bob Iger is executing, such as putting more decision-making into the creative teams, implementing a cost reduction plan, prioritizing streaming profitability, and improving the guest experience in our park. Cost cutting is expected to hit staff hard as Iger dismantles the division formerly known as DMED, Disney Media Entertainment Distribution, and shifts profit and loss controls back to creative leaders and others. DMED chairman Kareem Daniel already exited. He was thrown out the morning after Chapek was fired. But Iger's next move could affect 9 executives who led under Daniel, including Mitchell Paul, whose title is president of direct-to-consumer. Mitchell Paul is the guy that was in charge of that BAM technology group that Disney bought a percentage of and then wound up acquiring all of it. And he probably was very good on the tech side, but why he's running their direct-to-consumer business, it's a very big business, I don't know. I don't know how they figured that he'd be the guy that would run the thing. Technologically, sure. Let him keep the IT going, sure. And he's a creative guy and he's probably very smart, but should he be the head of like this giant game-changing streaming service division that is supposed to be the future of the company? One person close to Disney said the expectation internally is that they're going to cut thousands of people, adding that the coming quarter should see write-downs and cost cuts to cover content losses and severance packages. Senior executives are nervous and anxious, this person added. These people have been through it before in 2001 when the recession hit and Disney laid people off. Just so we understand what's going on here. Laying off thousands of people at Disney should be impossible, right? Because how do you just have extra thousands of people? Literally thousands. And we're not just talking about people like working at the theme parks, standing around doing nothing. We're talking about executives. We're talking about management. We're talking about marketing people, publicity people, administrative people, people of all kinds and types at all levels in the company. Literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people. This is going to be a massive layoff. I've done videos about this before talking about how I'm expecting to have massive layoffs at Disney because there's massive layoffs everywhere. The problem with Bob Iger is he's not managed really this kind of operation. The David Zaslav crew from Warner Bros. Discovery have done massive acquisitions, incorporated in massive numbers of employees, gigantic companies, world-flung operations. Bob Iger hasn't done that. He's acquired things. He's gotten the keys to the kingdom of people's most valued property. Ike Perlmutter's Marvel, Lucasfilm from George Lucas, Pixar away from Steve Jobs. He managed to pull that off. That's smooth. Good for him. But the problem is to actually control and reorganize these operations, they're so terrible at the Fox merger, and that was under Iger's time. For example, they closed Blue Sky Studios, which was the studio that created Ice Age, which was a multi-million dollar successful franchise. They just took it over, blew off the franchise, and closed down the studio. How is that for efficiency? That doesn't make sense. One thing Bob Iger is definitely going to do, because he has to do it, massive expense charges. And what that means is he's going to say, hey, because we've made this strategic change, we've got to have a one-time $2 billion expense here and a one-time $3 billion expense there. I'm going to estimate by the time they're done reorganizing the company, they'll do $5 to $10 billion in charges, much more than even Warner Bros. Discovery was doing, and they were doing massive cuts and changes at Warner Bros. Discovery. Are they going to cut content? Yes, they'll cut people, they'll cut content, but they'll also hide expenses in those charges. So if they want to say, hey, look, our profitability is actually better than it looks because we had to make these changes and cut these people and cut these divisions out, that's the kind of thing where they can hide expenses. Expect to see a lot in the way of charges. Some tomorrow when they make announcements, and a lot more over the next future quarter. Does that mean they can fix the company? Not necessarily. We'll see what happens. Internally, there's speculation that Disney will target people who work on non-premium digital products for layoffs. A metaverse team headed by Mike White to devise next-generation storytelling also is seen as vulnerable because its value is far from being realized. Yes, you can probably let the metaverse people go. 3 sources close to the company said DMED executives were interviewed about their jobs. The Disney rep declined to comment. When they're interviewed about their jobs, they go, it's actually like from the movie Office Space. They sit down and they say what do you actually do for the company? Why is that important to the company? What would you see yourself doing if you didn't do this job at the company anymore? That's the McKinsey consultants. Disney's last round of layoffs came in 2020 during the pandemic when the company shed some 32,000 workers and Iger took a pay cut. Oh my God. According to its annual report published in October 2022, which is probably pretty accurate, Disney employs some 220,000 employees, which is 30,000 more than in the year prior. Disney may opt to take all the pain of cuts and restructuring in 2023 and then hope that financial comparisons look better when Disney's fiscal first quarter begins in October. There is no way they can take all the cuts in 2023. Why? Because they need to do these massive charges until they do restructure the business and it's actually just kind of working. This will continue for 2 years. They also don't have the management team, again, that the Warner Bros. Discovery people do, to know how to do something like this in 8 months. That takes like a ninja management team, and that ain't what he's got over there. Restructuring Disney and cutting costs while facing a proxy battle. Iger is widely expected to follow the rest of the industry in taking costs out of the shrinking linear business. NBC Universal and Warner Bros. Discovery have both downsized, and Warner Bros. Discovery has begun to monetize some valuable library catalogs with rivals, while Disney is considering a similar path, according to reports. Quote, we expect Iger to say the right things about prioritizing direct-to-consumer profitability over subscriber growth and cost savings in the linear business on the earnings call. The linear business is their cable channels, their TV channels. Evercore ISI Media's Vijay Janyat wrote in a weekend investor note, cost cuts at a similar scale to the ones that NBCU is targeting in 2023 could translate to $1.3 billion in savings over the next several years, he suggested. Media investor Ross Gerber told Insider that Iger would get back to focusing on content rather than on the distribution mechanism. Chapek was looking at the ecosystem backwards, and the content was not up to Disney's typical success, he said. Iger isn't just trying to fix a company that's already been restructured following his 2018 $71 billion merger with Fox. He's also battling attacks from billionaire activist and shareholder Nelson Peltz. If you follow my channel, I've been saying a lot about Nelson Peltz. I think Peltz is going to win ultimately. If he doesn't get the board seat, he will win another way. He will keep pushing until he gets his way. He did it 30 other times with multi-billion-dollar companies. It's not that big a stretch to predict that Peltz is going to get his way. Peltz is gunning for a board seat, wants Iger to name a successor, which he's supposed to be doing, Iger, and is intent on winning back the stock dividend, which was suspended during the pandemic. The company's annual meeting is set for April 3rd. Will be a fight over whether Peltz can force changes at Disney. Disney wrote in its letter to shareholders that Peltz has demonstrated he does not understand Disney's business, he lacks perspective, blah, blah, blah. Nobody loves Nelson Peltz. Gerber, who's bullish on Disney, warns that Marvel movies are waning and notes that former Disney movie boss Alan Horn is now an advisor to rival Warner Bros. Discovery. We are not seeing massive Pixar hits, says Gerber. But while animation is sagging, Disney is succeeding elsewhere because they have nothing to do creatively with Avatar. They just wrote the checks because they wanted to be in business with James Cameron. Avatar: The Way of Water is the fourth biggest movie of all time with an over $2 billion in global revenue, and Black Panther: Wakanda Forever notched $842 million at the box office. One bright spot might be China, where Avatar: The Way of Water is playing, and 2 Marvel films have upcoming release dates after more than 3 years since the last Marvel film screened there. There's also recognition in China that if the newly constructed theaters are going to be economically feasible, there needs to be a bigger pipeline, and Disney's movies could benefit, according to one Hollywood executive who does international business. We've also heard that Shazam, the sequel, is going to be released from Warner Bros. Discovery in China as well. It looks like China wants more movies to show. But again, China only gives you 25 cents on the dollar with whatever their box office is, as compared to, say, Europe or Australia, which give you 40 cents on the dollar, or domestically, where you get 50 cents or more on the dollar. Hulu. Disney has been widely expected to simply consolidate Hulu early next year when it has an option to buy co-owner Comcast's 33% stake of the streamer. Comcast has been hoping Iger would be open to trading assets, Insider reported. But last week, after Bloomberg reported that Disney is exploring the possible licensing of some of its content, this is licensing of content, not sale of content. They're not selling their library. So they will go back to not having everything be exclusive to their own streaming service and distribution, which only makes sense because there are many, many opportunities to distribute content. You don't need to have them on your own proprietary platforms. This is what David Zaslav has been trying to tell people for quite a while now, and they're starting to listen. Rich Greenfeld, a partner at Lightshed Partners, suggested that the move might mean Iger is considering the sale of Hulu. That's actually ridiculous. There's no chance that they're going to sell Hulu. Completely silly. Hulu is a strong streamer, has a lot of subscribers. It's got Hulu Live as well, which has kind of like a similarity to local cable companies in that you've got local programming on it. It's very sticky. It holds its users, and it's an important part of Disney being able to market Disney Plus along with Hulu. If anything, which would be incredibly logical, they would fold Disney Plus into Hulu to make Hulu a monster and actually very successful. Puck News on Sunday reported that Disney hired Goldman Sachs to look at its options. The bank and Disney declined to comment. Hiring Goldman Sachs means, hey, you're professional advisors. We want you to advise us on the financial decisions we're making, and also show us valuations for the assets that we have. They need to be doing stuff like that. Part of that is also justifying the Fox acquisition. So they can say, hey, look, these assets and these divisions are worth this sorts of amounts of money. And maybe they do come up with an idea. Maybe Goldman Sachs does know another company that's willing to pay a ridiculous fortune for ABC, for example, which they could get rid of in a second. They can't get rid of ESPN. They can't get rid of Hulu. Too much of their distribution relies on those two assets. Cable and ESPN. Fixing the linear cable operations is likely to be a top priority for Iger, according to the Hollywood executive. A significant part of operating cash flow is the cable network, this person said. He's got to figure that out. He's probably thinking about the station group and the network. I'm sure he's thinking about how to get out of the A&E business with Hearst. Disney owns 50% of the cable company with Hearst, which is also a shareholder in ESPN, owning the balance. Several sources said Jimmy Pitaro, chairman of ESPN and sports content, has been spending a lot of time in Los Angeles with Iger amid speculation that Disney could spin off the cable sports giant. Spinning off ESPN was also suggested by another activist investor, Dan Loeb, before Chapek persuaded him to back off the idea. Bank of America analyst Raif Ehrlich said it would be tricky for Disney to spin off ESPN. It would be impossible for Disney to spin off ESPN, okay? That's me talking. In an investor note last week, she suggested the sports network has an enterprise value of $23 billion if spun out. Back in 2014, a Wall Street analyst put a $50 billion valuation on ESPN. Raif Ehrlich also wrote that ESPN is too tightly configured with the rest of the company for Disney to let it go, and besides, the sports behemoth still provides much of the cash flow to pay for streaming. ESPN needs to be controlled and owned by Disney. If it's not, then Disney would lose distribution of all of its low-end to mediocre cable channels. If they didn't lose the distribution of those because they sell them in a bundle to the cable distributors, they would get much less money for those other channels. Parks. Chapek boosted margins at the company's parks by raising prices. Disney World's most expensive ticket, for example, went from $159 to $189. And while consumers are still piling in, they're increasingly frustrated. Iger tweeted a photo of himself at Disney World dressed in a relaxed green cardigan and gray slacks as he posed with cast members on January 19th. While it was all smiles for the camera, he'll have to figure out how to deal with Disney World employees who in early February overwhelmingly rejected a $1 pay raise offer, according to Orlando Weekly and according to the New York Times. Iger has scheduled meetings with analysts and business partners in February and March, several people said. One senior media executive with knowledge of Disney told Insider it's unlikely that Iger can reestablish his shine with analysts and shareholders in one earnings call. No, he absolutely can't do it in one earnings call. He's going to be able to do it by having positive statements to make about Disney and doing massive charges and reorganization, having a few quarters in a row of successful results by masking losses through these one-time charges. That could help Disney. The problem is Nelson Peltz and other people like Nelson Peltz are going to be going after Bob Iger. They're going to be going after the accounting practices. They're going to be accusing Bob Iger of terrible things, very likely in public, and attacking him until he leaves in shame. I don't see Bob Iger digging out of this mess. He left on this incredible high, and here he is a year later under pressure from an investor, an activist who wants a seat on the board, from society, progressives who want him to stay true to the cause, and conservatives who think the company is too woke, from unions and customers who feel like the product has gotten too expensive. And he's under pressure from his own balance sheet, which he created with the Fox deal. It leaves him with very little room to maneuver. He has no room to maneuver. Unless some of his enemies and some of his opposition back down, Bob Iger can't pull out of this. He's on the wrong side of momentum. When momentum slows down, you're in big trouble. Let me know what you think of Bob Iger and his chances below. I always love to see your comments. Let me know if you think Bob Iger is going to have a great week. Tomorrow is where he makes his big announcements for the quarter and what his future is he sees for the company. Thousands and thousands and thousands of layoffs. You remember how much trouble Warner Brothers Discovery was in? People were so concerned. Are they going to be able to pull off all these layoffs and these restructuring? They got it done, but they kind of did know what they were doing. Does Bob Iger know what he's doing? Can he lay off, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people like it's trivial, and still get the company to operate at any kind of level, but also explain what were these employees doing there in the first place if you're able to cut several thousand employees and supposedly not have a negative effect on the business? Always like to see what your comments are. Please do leave them below. Please be sure you subscribe to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.